Okay, tonight we're going to talk about how we graph rational functions. So let's start out by reviewing a little bit of what we've learned in the past. So far we've learned about certain kind of functions, two different kinds of functions in algebra. So if we look at this, we have a fraction, but can anyone tell me what kind of function this is? Thinking about the degree, have you seen this before? Yes, there's a slope and there's also a y-intercept. We call this a linear function. That's because you have x here to the first power. Notice that just because you have a fraction does not make it a rational function. There's no variables in the denominator. So that's what makes it a linear function. It looks similar to y equals mx plus b, doesn't it? You remember that? The equation of a line. If you graph a linear function, what's the graph going to look like? It's going to be a line, exactly. State the x-intercepts. So actually what's easier is to state the y-intercept. So let's skip this one for now. What's the y-intercept? Does anybody know? -3. You knew that right away. And I'm going to write it as an ordered pair, 0, -3. Turns out whenever you want a y-intercept, which the y-intercept happens where? On the y-axis, the equation of the y-axis is x equals 0. So anytime you plug in x equals 0 and all you did was you went f of 0 and you plugged in x equals 0 here, the only thing left is -3. That's how you found your y-intercept, even though you knew it was in that form. How would I find the x-intercept? And for this, I might use a little bit of extra paper. So the x-intercept is going to happen on the x-axis. What's the equation for the x-axis? It's y equals 0. So y is always equal to 0 on the x-axis. If I want to find the x-intercept, I'm going to set y equal to 0, or in other words, I'm going to solve when f of x is equal to 0. So I set f of x equal to 0. I have 3x divided by 4 minus 3. What would I do to solve for x there? Because I want when y equals 0, I want to know what my x value is. Any thoughts about how I can solve for x? Add 3 to both sides. I get 3 equals 3x over 4. It's the opposite of dividing. Or what can you do to undo the 3/4? Yes, multiply by 4. You could also divide by 3. Because that would be the reciprocal, right? If I'm going to divide by the fraction 3/4, I'm going to multiply by 4/3 to do it in one step. What's the denominator on the 3? Right, we're going to make it into a fraction. So 3, can I cross cancel? 4 equals x. Yeah? Is that what you guys got? Any questions about how I solved that? Okay, so there's two ways that you can graph. Well, there's a lot of different ways that you can graph lines. You can use your graphing calculator and you would type this in under y equals and it will help you with your graph. But you can also plot your y-intercept, which is on the y-axis, 0, -3. You can plot your x-intercept, which is on the x-axis, 4, 0. This point is 0, -3. And then you could take a ruler. Why don't I have my ruler handy? And you could draw that line, right? How many points do you need to form a line? You just need 2. You could also use the slope. Who can tell me what the slope is? M is the slope. Slope is? Yes, it's rise over run. And that's up 3 over 4. Up 3 over 4. Down 3, backwards 4. Okay, because you could go -3 over -4. That would be a rise over run of still positive, right? What's a negative divided by a negative? A positive. Okay, so that's how we would find our x and y intercepts, and then we could plot those points. We get a line. What's the domain of the function? You can use any values of x. What's the range of the function? The range is the y values. What y values will you get if you plug in any x values? And by the way, negative infinity to positive infinity is the same thing as all real numbers. And that's because you can see I'm putting arrows on the ends of my lines, and so I can use any x values I want. I don't have a restriction, and I can use whatever y values I want. Okay, now let's talk about this one. If we see f of x equals x squared plus 4x minus 12, what kind of function is this? It's a quadratic function. How do you know it's a quadratic function? What about it tells you that? Yes, and we say this has a degree of 2. By the way, what was the degree of the linear function? Yes, degree of 1. So degree of 2 means it's quadratic. What will the graph of a quadratic function look like? Yes, a parabola. Okay, state the x-intercepts. Now again, the x-intercepts are a little bit more challenging. I prefer the y-intercept first. Let's do the y-intercept. Does anybody know what the y-intercept is? Yes, 0, negative 12. That's as an ordered pair, 0, negative 12. So we know it's going to cross over here, 0, negative 12. We could find the axis of symmetry and the vertex, but let's start with the x-intercepts. All along the x-axis, we said the x-axis is equal to y equals 0. And so how will I find the x-intercepts? Set the parabola x squared plus 4x minus 12 equal to 0 because we want to solve when f of x equals 0. We want to find our x values. So how do we typically solve a quadratic once we've set it equal to 0? That's a hint right there. What am I about ready to do? Factor. Okay, give me two numbers that multiply to negative 12 and add to positive 4. 6 and negative 2. So what does that mean x would equal? Okay, 2 and negative 6. So what are my x-intercepts? That's why it has an S here. You might have 2 of them, right? Can anyone tell me the ordered pairs? Yes, 2, 0, negative 6, 0. And so on my graph, I have negative 6, 0. And over here, I have 2, 0. Now, if you can't remember how to find the axis of symmetry, remember that the parabola is symmetrical. Can anyone tell me what they predict it would be without using any kind of formula? What would be the halfway point between negative 6 and 2? Yes, negative 2. So negative 2, there is a line here, x equals negative 2. That's the axis of symmetry. If you might recall that x equals negative b over 2a is the formula for how you find the axis of symmetry. So what's negative b? Negative 4 over 2 times a is 2. And so there's our x equals negative 2. Same thing as what you got when you just reasoned it out based on the graph, based on your x-intercepts, right? You're like halfway in between those 2 points was x equals negative 2. That's a negative, by the way, right there. Okay, now how do we find the vertex? If I know that x equals negative 2 is my axis of symmetry, how will I find the vertex? What will I have to do with that number negative 2? Yeah, plug it in. F of negative 2 equals negative 2 squared. Don't forget parentheses because you want to square all of that number, plus 4 times negative 2 minus 12. Of course, you can use your calculator here, but I think it will be easier maybe just to do it this way. So negative 4 minus 12, is that negative 16? Check my math. Okay, you can use our calculator if you want. Negative 2, negative 16. Oh, and that's convenient because they listed negative 16 on the graph. So negative 2, negative 16 is the vertex. If there's one point over here, can you tell me what would be a symmetrical point on the other side of the axis of symmetry? Yes, -4, -12. And then we can draw our parabola. How do I know that the parabola is opening upward? What about the equation says that it's going to open upward? Yes, the fact that A is equal to 1 means the parabola is opening upward. It's a positive. The fact that A is greater than 1, I should say, not just the fact that it's equal to 1. Okay, what's the domain of the parabola? The domain of all parabolas is always all real numbers, -infinity to positive infinity. We call that interval notation. That's the way I'm writing that. And then what's the range? The range is referring to the y values, right? What are the y values? -16 to infinity. And yes, I love how you said included. The bracket means the number is included. Well, infinity, we put a parenthesis around infinity because we can never get there. But if it was an open circle, Megan, what we were talking about before, if it was an open circle, the number would not be included. Okay? All right, let's stop this and then we'll do the next one in the next video.